Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you a technique that I use to paint clouds in gouache. This isn't the only way to paint them, and certainly there's many techniques that you can use. I'm sure you can find other tutorials here on YouTube, and my way is not the only way, nor is it the right way for every situation. But I'm going to be showing you a wet in wet technique that works really well for me. It's really fast, and I find that it helps me avoid overworking my clouds in my paintings. That's something that I find I used to do a lot, is just like paint my clouds and keep painting on them until they were muddy, they didn't look good anymore. I basically put too much work into them and didn't let the paint and the water do what it does best, which is flow and make nice natural textures that you can't get by overworking it. And also it ate up a lot of time. It would ruin paintings, especially plein air paintings that I was working on. And so I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've learned that makes painting clouds faster and generally more rewarding because the paintings turn out better. So I have a few here that I just wanted to talk about first before we get into the actual real-time tutorial portion. But these are a couple different versions, and these are done on different paper. This is on a 90-pound smooth, and this is a 140-pound cold press. So you can see that the technique works on different types of paper. It doesn't matter if you use cotton paper or cellulose. Cotton paper will stay wet longer and give you more flexibility with the wet in wet portion of it. Cellulose paper, the paint tends to dry faster, so you'll just have to work a bit faster. That's all. But you can see here that basically I'll show you the steps when we get to the tutorial part, but it's not a lot of layers. It's about one layer of paint that you work with while it's wet. And then you get these really nice blooms here. You can see that the white is still quite bright. It's just white paint on the paper. There's nothing behind it. I'm not painting in the blue behind the cloud because that will give you basically a blue cloud. There's only so many layers you can do with gouache, so doing it simply like this preserves the brightness in the cloud, gives it a bit of a fluffiness, whereas you can still get that deep blue in the sky because it's not behind the cloud, right? You're not putting down that cerulean behind the titanium. On this side here, you see that you can blend in a lot of different colors and get complex cloud gradations like they do in real life without having to do a ton of complicated layers. This is all just wet into wet. You let the colors bleed together and it gives it a softer, more natural look as opposed to trying to block in all these different colors on top of dry layers of gouache. And this one here, you can see that although it's, it's blue and it's this white, I've also dropped in a lot of warm colors in the bottom of the cloud here. And because they diffuse, they don't look too artificial. They blend out really nicely and they give the clouds a bit of a warm glow, which you would get on, sort of a morning or evening scene. Whereas this with the stark blues, this is more of a noon time, like clear sky with a few clouds look, and this one's more of a sunset. So you can use this technique for basically any time of day, any type of clouds you're painting, just as long as you observe, or at least if you're painting from your imagination, you can decide what colors it's going to be. You set up your page, and then you go and you let the paint make the clouds, and I'm going to show you how to do that. All right, so here are the supplies you will need to paint your cloud. A pencil, basically. I'll use a mechanical pencil, but you can use a hard lead pencil or anything that works for you. There's not a lot of drawing involved in it, so just whatever's handy and quick to use. You're definitely going to need some white. I recommend titanium white, but you can also use zinc white. It doesn't matter for this technique really. It just depends if you want a more pastel look, or the zinc white will open up your paints to be a little bit brighter and a little less desaturated, but I kind of like a bit of desaturation. And then I recommend fresh squeezes of your sky color if you have a lot of blue sky to paint. In this particular reference, I don't have a lot of blue, so I'm going to be using it from dry paint here, as you can see. You'll need your paper, of course. This is just a really cheap cellulose watercolor paper. And I recommend using a large brush. I like these angled brushes because you get the large bit of a flat brush, but you also can use the point to do details by itself. That way you're not switching between brushes, because this is going to be a fairly fast process. I'm going to leave it real time so you can see basically just how quick it's going to be. It's going to be a few minutes. But yeah, I recommend a big brush. You can also use a flat oval wash brush, that'll work, or a really big round, that'll work too. Alright, so here is the reference photo that I'm going to be using for this tutorial. You're welcome to use the same reference photo as me if you want to follow along. I took this photo myself, so yeah, you're welcome to use it. It was a great cloud that I saw one day, and it's got a lot of different colors and textures in it, so it'll make this a fairly informative tutorial, hopefully. So what you want to do first is just very lightly sketch out the shape of the cloud, and don't press too hard because you want the final product to mostly just be paint. You don't want to see these lines because, of course, clouds don't really have lines in real life, and we're going for the impression of a cloud, you know, the light and the feeling of it. It's not going to look exactly like the photo. That's not the point here. It's sort of more impressionistic, and you're not trying for absolute verisimilitude, you know. You're trying for, how does this cloud feel when you look at it, and how do you want your painting to feel? Because unless you're doing a painting that's just clouds, like, your cloud is rarely the focus of your image. It's often just the backdrop. So you want it to recede, and we're going to do that by just keeping it really soft. And there's two clouds here. There's the one in the front. Actually, there's like three. There's three sections. There's this cloud in the front. There's the wispy clouds in front of that. But then there's a bigger cloud that's more stormy in the background. So this is my sketch. It's very light, as you can see. It's very wispy and not too defined, but it's going to just help me know where to place the pigment when I get started painting here. Okay, I've zoomed you in a little bit, and we're just going to start in the reference photo. There's a grayish blue patch of sky in the edge here, and we're just going to start there. I always start with the sky first. And work negatively. Basically, I go around where the clouds are and don't paint into the clouds. So we'll do cerulean and a bit of this gray, which will neutralize it and give it that stormy sort of feeling. And we'll start in the corner here and work negatively, moving inward as we go. So. And as you can see, I'm working very wet. The paint is about the consistency of milk or tea with milk in it. And since it gets progressively grayer, I'm just going to pick up more of that gray and go into it here like this, because this one cloud in the back sort of fades into the sky. Right, like that. So as you can see, since my paint is so wet, it's blending itself for me. And I will warn you that cerulean is a bit of a granulating color, and it behaves differently than colors with lots of white in it. So just be aware of that. You can see that it's doing some extra texture here. You can mollify that a bit by squeaking a bit of titanium white into it. As you can see, it'll soak up some of the blue and make it a little less granulaty, a little less chunky. So if you find that your blue is not doing it for you, just sneak a little white in it. This gray that I use has already white included, so that works as well. And because this big cloud in the back goes around the bright cloud in the front, we're going to continue this wash into that cloud in the back. So now I'm going to pick up some of the white and blend it into that as well, because there's the edge of the back cloud over here sort of sticks out from the rest of the sky and then blends in over here. So still very wet. I've got more white on my brush than anything right now. And I'm just pouncing that in there. And then if you find that your paint is drying out a little bit, you can always add more water, just glaze it on like that, right? And let it do its thing. So once you're working wet into wet like this, you can always go back in and smoosh the paint around and make it do what you need it to do. So that'll be my cloud in the back, very gray and blue and mixed together. And now going into the cloud in the white, you want your brush nice and clean. I mean, this still has some white on it, but we're going to be painting a white cloud, so load up your brush with a lot of white. You can see my brush is like nice and creamy on there. And we're just going to go right around the edge here. And in certain sections, if you end up touching the other colors and they bleed in because they're still wet, that's okay. That's sort of going to look more effortless, you know? So you just go right around the edge and paint only the cloud in white. Now, this is different than if you were using watercolor. If you were using watercolor, you would not put any pigment on. You would just paint the cloud in water. Does that make sense? Because then it'll touch the edges and still bleed a little bit. But because we're using gouache, we want to use white because the pigments will blend better with a bit of white. And this way too, the painting is going to have the same opacity throughout. With gouache, I just find that looks better. I mean, that's not to say that it's the right way or the only way to do things. I just think it looks better, and this is the technique I use. So fill that in with white, right? Because that's going to give us the wet pigment base for the rest of the painting. And because this cloud is a bit like warm, it's got a bit of like a pinky yellowiness to it, we're going to take a little bit of that. And while the paint is still very white and wet, we're going to brush that in too. And if you get too much in there and it's like, oh, this cloud is too orange or like too yellow, just take more white and go over top of it. See, like there, that's a bit much. So I'm just going to take some more white and brush over it like that. I'm taking a little bit of sort of a purpley color too. A little more white again. Just like that. Now for all of the modeling on this cloud in the front, because it's got these billows and stuff, we're going to mix a bluish gray color. You don't want this to be too saturated unless it's that way in your reference photo, of course, or unless that's like the look you're going for, but I'm just doing, I'll show you here, just like a very blue-gray color. And it's quite wet because I want it to move around a lot. And you're just going to brush that with a small pit of your brush into the places that it'll be on your cloud. And you can see it's starting to spread out, and if it looks a bit weird, honestly, just give it a little bit and let it do its thing. And if your cloud is too dry and your paint is not spreading, I'll show you how to fix that in a second. So I think that'll do for that. And since some bits of it were quite dry, this is partly because I'm using cellulose paper. It's going to dry faster. Just take more white, brush it so that it touches the edges that you want to blend out, and it'll blend out. Like so. Going to get a little more of this bluish gray color up here. And I think that bit I like that it's a bit more defined than the rest. So now we just have to look at this dark wispy cloud in the front of the composition. So I'll show you here on the reference again, this bit, that's what we're talking about. So we want to make a darker bluey gray. I am using Payne's gray and a little bit of ultramarine and some white to make this color. So you can see here, this is the color. It's darker than the rest, and it will also dry darker because it has that Payne's gray in it. Also, I just made a little oops here and got a blob of the darkness on this cloud, but you can just take a wet brush, and because you have so much white pigment underneath, it'll lift right off. There, it's gone. So taking some of that dark color, we're going to scooch that across where those dark wispy clouds are. And if you find you're running out of pigment, which will happen because, again, we have so much white on here, just mix some more and brush that in. But as you can see, like, because the white on here is so wet still, the pigment is very mobile, but it's not as mobile as watercolor. That's what I like about gouache. It's sort of more of a creamy feeling, and it makes more of a feathery look sometimes than watercolor does. It's soft, it's fuzzy. I love painting clouds like this. And I hope you do too. I hope this is fun for you. So yeah, just brush that across. Those will be our wispy clouds in the front. I'm going to brush a little bit up here. And I'm going to brush a little bit into this sky too, because I kind of want to bring more of this gray color into the sky. I want it to look a little more stormy than it did before. Alright, so right now my paper is pretty wrinkly. I'll move the light so you can sort of see, like, yeah, it's like wrinkly. So I will let this dry and then I'll come back and show you how it turned out. But you can already see all of the nice, cool gouache textures happening. It doesn't look exactly like the reference photo, but it is a nice painting. So that's just all I'm trying to achieve here. Alright, so here's the final piece. It's dry now, and you can see that the paint has made its own little textures in here, basically just letting the water and the pigment do what it wants to do, and just following a few easy steps. So starting with the background and working negatively around the clouds, then blocking in the clouds with a base color, in this case white, and then modeling the clouds, giving them some volume, and adding the finishing touches. So really quick. I hope that this tutorial was helpful. It may take you some practice. The main thing to do is remember not to overwork it, and at a certain point just let it be. Like, for example, I'm not super happy with this section here or this color here, but that's what I made, you know. This is the painting that happened, and letting it be finished is a really important part of the artistic process. So this one's finished. I'm very happy with sort of the textures here, this color and the warm colors in the white of the cloud. So, you know, just keep moving forward, keep painting clouds, and you'll get more comfortable with them, and they'll turn out more to your liking as you learn and grow as you learn and practice. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Let me know in the comments if you appreciated it, if it was illuminating, and please like and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!